Hello friends. Have you ever seen two people together and wondered how they even make it work? Like, what does a restless, witty, fast-talking Gemini man have in common with a grounded, sensual, slow-moving Taurus woman? Can air and earth really build something stable? Or are they destined to crash and crumble under the weight of their differences? Buckle up, because we're about to explore the whirlwind dynamic between the Gemini man and Taurus woman, from that first flirtatious spark all the way to whether or not they can build a love that lasts. Chemistry. Initial attraction. It all starts subtly, almost invisibly, but with unmistakable intrigue. The Gemini man, ruled by Mercury, walks into a room and immediately starts scanning the space. Not for drama or attention, but for mental stimulation. His eyes land on her, the Taurus woman, Venus-ruled, calm, grounded, and radiating something he doesn't quite understand yet. She isn't laughing the loudest or dominating the conversation, but she holds herself with such effortless poise that he's immediately drawn in. She's magnetic without trying, and that makes her irresistible. He's used to catching attention with his words. He's the type to drop a clever comment, spark a conversation with anyone, juggle social circles like a circus act. But when he approaches her, it's different. She doesn't fawn over his charm. She watches, she listens, and when she responds, it's deliberate, measured, like each word has weight. And to a Gemini, that's fascinating. Her quiet strength pulls him in like gravity. Meanwhile, the Taurus woman is cautious by nature. She doesn't rush into anything, especially not romance. She notices his charm, yes. She hears the quick wit, the layered humor, the playful banter. She even smiles at it. But deep inside, she's asking herself, can I trust this energy? Is there something real behind the show? She's not jaded, just realistic. She's not interested in being another page in someone's chapter. She's in it for the full story. Yet even with that cautious filter, she feels the pull too. His mental agility is impressive. He's clever without being arrogant, humorous without trying too hard. And he's interested, not in her body, necessarily, not at first, but in the way she thinks, the way she looks at the world. That's rare. That makes her pause. And for someone as slow to open up as Taurus, that pause is the beginning of something significant. The chemistry between them is almost paradoxical. He's air, fast-moving, invisible, always shifting. She's earth, solid, warm, and still. And that contrast, it's electric. He's used to floating through life, flitting from one idea to the next, and she's this grounding force he didn't even know he needed. She doesn't try to change him, doesn't try to catch him. She just exists fully in her presence, and that's what makes him slow down. He starts to find her mystery intoxicating. He loves that she doesn't reveal everything, that she makes him work a little for her laughter, for her thoughts, for her attention. And the Taurus woman? She finds his endless curiosity oddly comforting. He's not boring, he's not conventional, and even though that unsettles her, it also stirs something deeper, a dormant craving for spontaneity, for play, for newness. As their connection begins to form, it's filled with subtext. Long glances, subtle smiles, conversations that drift from the practical to the poetic. It's a slow build, nothing rushed, nothing loud. But it's intense beneath the surface, like tectonic plates shifting just below the calm. And then there's the laughter. That's one of the first bridges between them. He cracks a joke, not to impress her, but because that's who he is. She doesn't laugh immediately, but when she does, it's real, full, and he notices. She has that rare kind of laugh that doesn't come out easily, but when it does, it feels like an invitation. And he wants more of that. Suddenly, every joke has more purpose. Every clever comment is laced with hope. The dance has begun. Over time, this attraction grows roots. She begins to see that beneath his playful exterior, he's not just a social butterfly, he's got layers. Thoughts, a need to be understood. He's not shallow, he's scattered. There's a difference, and once she sees it, she starts to invest. Bit by bit, she lets him in. Likewise, he starts to admire her strength. Not the loud kind, but the kind that holds steady when things get messy. She doesn't get pulled into chaos. She doesn't overreact. She's an anchor. And while that might scare some, for Gemini, who's always halfway out the door mentally, it's comforting. He starts to see her not as someone who'll trap him, but someone who could catch him mid-fall. Physically, the attraction begins subtly. He's flirtatious, but she's tactile in her own way. She may not engage in overt teasing, but she might fix the cuff on his sleeve, brush a crumb off his jacket, or look him in the eye just a second too long. He notices every bit of it, and she notices that he notices. They aren't immediately all over each other. It's not hot and heavy from the start. Instead, it's like a storm gathering on the horizon. You feel it long before the clouds roll in. There's tension, yes, but it's laced with possibility. What makes this initial phase so captivating is how much they surprise each other. Gemini, who thought he'd seen it all, realizes he hasn't. Not until now. And Taurus, who usually keeps her distance, finds herself smiling more than expected. Thinking about him more than she should. Wondering, not if this could work, but what it would feel like if it did. And that's the moment the door opens. Because the initial attraction between a Gemini man and Taurus woman isn't based on logic. It's not even entirely emotional. It's energetic. It's the meeting of stillness and motion, of mystery and curiosity. It's not obvious, but once it starts, it's incredibly difficult to ignore. Still, one truth remains. Sparking a connection is one thing. Sustaining it, that's the real test. Because once the novelty wears off, once real life sets in, and once they see each other not as archetypes but as people, flawed, fascinating, and fully themselves, the question becomes not do they like each other, but can they navigate the gap between their natures? That's the real dance, that's the slow burn, and that's where their story truly begins. Emotional dynamics. This is where the colorful, exciting, and often flirtatious Gemini man begins to feel the undeniable tension of emotional reality, and where the calm, emotionally grounded Taurus woman starts to see the cracks beneath his charming exterior. Up to this point, their chemistry may have danced in the playful light of newness, but emotions bring in the shadows. And in those shadows, we start to see who they really are. The Gemini man processes his world through thought. His feelings often pass through the filter of language, analysis, and detachment before ever becoming visible. He's not heartless, not even close. But he's learned to manage discomfort through deflection. Vulnerability, for him, feels like being naked in the middle of Times Square. He'd rather crack a joke, shift the topic, or ghost temporarily to avoid confronting the emotional demands of the moment. Taurus woman, however, lives emotionally in a very different space. She doesn't need constant validation or dramatic gestures, but she does need emotional presence. Her heart operates on a slow, steady rhythm. When she invests, she does so with intention. Her love is like planting a tree, meant to grow roots, not just bloom for a season. But when she senses inconsistency or emotional flightiness, her protective walls rise instantly. This difference in emotional tempo becomes the first major stress fracture in their connection. He interprets her silence as coldness. She interprets his avoidance as immaturity. He wants to move on from a disagreement quickly, maybe even laughing it off. She wants to sit with it, understand it, and ensure it never happens again. One wants air, the other needs earth. One floats through storms, the other braces for them. Let's get specific. Imagine a moment of vulnerability. The Taurus woman has had a rough day, and she opens up. Maybe not even dramatically, just quietly. She says she's feeling overwhelmed. She needs reassurance. She's looking not for solutions, but for emotional anchoring. The Gemini man, unsure how to respond to such weight, might try to lighten the mood. Well, let's just fly to the Bahamas and forget the world, yeah? It's meant to be playful, maybe even loving. But to her, it feels like he's dodging her need. She closes off. He senses rejection. And suddenly, they're farther apart than they were 5 minutes ago. The misunderstanding here isn't about care. It's about style. He cares, but expresses that through movement, distraction, and humor. She cares, but shows it through stillness, consistency, and presence. And until they both recognize that their emotional operating systems are coded differently, they'll keep missing each other at the intersection of intimacy. For the Gemini man, emotional evolution in this relationship requires effort, and yes, discomfort. He must learn that emotions can't always be bypassed with logic or laughter. That presence sometimes means silence. That listening is more powerful than solving. And most importantly, that vulnerability isn't a trap. It's an invitation. The Taurus woman, meanwhile, has her own growth curve. Her stability can border on stubbornness. When she's hurt, she retreats deep within herself, locking the doors behind her. She must learn that not everyone expresses love the way she does. That unpredictability isn't always a threat, it can be part of growth. And that sometimes, a partner who drifts emotionally isn't abandoning her, but simply seeking to process things in a different way. Their emotional friction often reveals itself during transitions, moving in together, facing family challenges, career changes. Times when feelings can't be managed from a distance. The Gemini man might feel overwhelmed by the weight of emotional expectations he doesn't fully understand. He's not trying to escape, he just doesn't know what to do. The Taurus woman, craving clarity and reassurance, may demand more than he can offer in that moment, more than words, more than gestures. She wants consistency, and he, by default, is a creature of variation. This can lead to long silences, cold dinners, the kind of tension that doesn't explode, but simmers. And simmering tension in a Taurus woman? That's deep. She won't yell, she won't lash out, but she will remember, and she will protect herself, emotionally, from future wounds. That's the real danger, not the fight, but the wall that quietly builds between them. But here's the hidden hope. Gemini, for all his detachment, is capable of extraordinary emotional intelligence if he chooses to be present. He can listen, learn, and adapt faster than most. And Taurus, while slow to trust, is loyal to the core once she feels safe. If he learns to stay, even when it's uncomfortable, and she learns to express without expecting perfection, they can build something unusual. Something lasting. And in their best moments, they meet in the middle. He pauses his racing thoughts long enough to feel. She opens her stillness enough to move. They don't need to become each other. They just need to respect how the other loves. Because ultimately, emotional compatibility isn't about sameness. It's about effort, willingness, and a shared belief that love is worth the translation. Love, in this match, doesn't look like a fairy tale. It looks like a clever man holding still when he wants to run, and a strong woman letting go when she wants to control. It looks like two people learning each other's emotional languages, one misstep at a time. And in those learning moments, awkward, raw, and very human, they find something they never expected. Intimacy built not on perfection, but on practice. Long-term compatibility. Let's not sugarcoat it. Long-term compatibility between a Gemini man and a Taurus woman is a high-wire act. No net, no shortcuts, and no easy rhythm. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. In fact, it can be one of the most rewarding journeys for two people who are willing to evolve, not just as individuals, but as partners navigating love through different elemental lenses, air and earth, movement and stillness. The foundation of the challenge is simple, yet profound. These two are wired completely differently. The Gemini man is restless by nature. He's a wanderer, mentally and often physically. He seeks stimulation like oxygen, always on the lookout for new experiences, fresh ideas, and spontaneous adventures. In the realm of long-term love, he needs the feeling of freedom, even when he's committed. He needs to know he won't be boxed in or emotionally smothered. The Taurus woman, in contrast, is a builder. She builds homes, traditions, routines, safety nets. She doesn't fear stability, she craves it. Her love is a constant, something you can count on even when the world feels uncertain. She thrives in environments where things are familiar and secure. Change, especially the sudden kind, feels like a threat to her emotional balance. So what happens when one person thrives on disruption and the other on continuity? The first years, or even months, of a long-term relationship between them can feel like trial by fire. Not because they don't love each other, but because they love in such different ways. Gemini's need to keep things light and mobile can feel like emotional detachment to Taurus. Taurus's preference for routine and planning can feel like suffocation to Gemini. If they're not careful, their differences can harden into silent resentments. She starts thinking he's unreliable. He starts thinking she's controlling. But that's only one path. The other, if they choose it, is mutual transformation. When the Gemini man allows himself to slow down, not to stop, but to breathe, he begins to see the value in the Taurus woman's stability. She becomes his anchor. She reminds him that there's beauty in stillness. That not every day needs to be reinvented. That love can be something you sink into, not escape from. In her calm, he finds refuge. In her loyalty, he finds grounding. And she, in turn, begins to see the world through his eyes. He takes her places she would never have gone on her own, literally and emotionally. He pushes her to question her assumptions, to consider new ideas, to embrace change not as chaos but as a kind of creative evolution. Through him, she becomes more open, more spontaneous, more alive in the unknown. This is the essence of their long-term compatibility, balance through contrast. But it requires something difficult from both sides, compromise. And not just the polite kind, the deep, uncomfortable, ego-challenging kind. For Gemini, this means showing up even when he'd rather disappear. Staying for the hard conversations. Accepting that love isn't always shiny and new, that sometimes it's slow, repetitive, even boring. But it's in those moments that trust is built. For Taurus, this means loosening her grip on predictability, letting go of the need to control every outcome, realizing that flexibility isn't failure, and that unpredictability doesn't always mean danger, it can mean growth. Sometimes, a little mess is where magic lives. Financial planning, daily routines, and long-term goals are frequent battlegrounds. Taurus wants a clear plan, joint savings, long-term investments, maybe even a calendar for chores. Gemini recoils at too much structure, preferring to see how things go. This contrast can either become a tug of war or an opportunity to create a dynamic middle ground where practicality meets spontaneity. Maybe he agrees to follow a budgeting app, and she agrees to the occasional spontaneous road trip. Balance. Parenting, if it enters the picture, adds another layer. Taurus likely envisions a steady, nurturing household with set rules and bedtime stories at 8 p.m. sharp. Gemini might want to encourage intellectual freedom, creative play, and discussions about astronomy at midnight. At first, their parenting styles seem at odds, but together, they can raise curious children who feel both safe and stimulated. Again, it's about integration, not dominance. Another test of long-term compatibility is how they handle stagnation. Taurus might lean into routine so deeply that things begin to feel stale. Gemini, sensing the dullness, may start to pull away or seek outside distractions. This is when renewal becomes essential. They need to periodically reimagine their life together, new hobbies, fresh goals, shared experiences, to avoid slipping into emotional autopilot. Travel can also become a healing bridge. Gemini brings spontaneity to trips. Taurus ensures there's a hotel booked. Gemini wants to roam. Taurus ensures there's a map. Together, they can create adventures that are thrilling yet safe, new yet comforting, reflecting the very best of what their energies can co-create. Emotional renewal is equally important. Gemini must invest in her emotionally, not just with words, but through consistent actions. Texts are great, but so are showing up when he says he will, listening without distraction, and touching base even when life is busy. Taurus, for her part, needs to be willing to express when she feels hurt or insecure, not with passive aggression or withdrawal, but with vulnerability and trust. Honesty is their bridge. Sexually, long-term compatibility depends on rhythm. Taurus desires sensual connection that deepens over time. Gemini seeks variety and mental foreplay. If they prioritize learning each other's love languages, they can keep their intimate life evolving, not just out of passion, but out of curiosity and trust. The biggest risk in their long-term journey isn't incompatibility, it's inflexibility. If either one digs in and refuses to shift, the relationship slowly calcifies into resentment. But if they both remain open, not just to each other, but to change, they can create a union that few others understand, but many envy. Because when air and earth truly merge, they create something unique, a landscape of dreams grounded in reality. Their love becomes a place where ideas are planted, and possibilities grow into plans. Where freedom and fidelity coexist. Where he learns to land, and she learns to leap. That's not just compatibility, that's partnership. And that's what makes this match, when nurtured, not just possible, but extraordinary. Communication conflict resolution. This is where their differences don't just show, they collide. And not in a casual, he said, she said, kind of way. In a Gemini man-Taurus woman relationship, communication isn't just a tool. It's the battlefield, the bridge, and the breaking point, all at once. Because while both partners value connection, they approach it with dramatically different emotional languages and emotional weaponry. One uses words like arrows. The other uses silence like armor. Let's begin with the Gemini man. He's a communicator to his core. Ruled by Mercury, he is constantly in motion, thoughts firing, sentences forming, responses ready before the other person finishes speaking. To him, talking is how problems get solved. Conflict is something to be examined, explained, maybe even explored intellectually. He doesn't necessarily want to win in the traditional sense, but he does want to understand, and be understood. He's quick, agile, and often emotionally detached in the heat of a disagreement. Now enter the Taurus woman. Ruled by Venus, she's not here for circular debates or theoretical exercises in what if. She wants resolution, not just discussion. She wants empathy, not cleverness. And most of all, she wants respect, not just in tone, but in timing, space, and delivery. When conflict arises, her instincts say, don't react fast. Don't speak if you're not sure. Sit, feel, steady yourself. It's not avoidance, it's internal processing. But to Gemini, this silence can feel like punishment. So now you have a classic impasse. He's throwing out ideas like darts, trying to fix or dissect the issue. She's sitting there, arms crossed, looking like she's checked out of the conversation. He sees stonewalling. She feels overwhelmed. He pushes harder. She shuts down further. And before you know it, a disagreement about dinner plans spirals into a cold war over mutual respect, trust, and emotional safety. This kind of dynamic is dangerous if left unchecked, not because it means they don't care, but because it reinforces a destructive loop. He talks more because she talks less. She talks less because he talks more. The gap widens, and so does the misunderstanding. What makes it even trickier is that Gemini men often use humor to diffuse tension. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it backfires spectacularly. Picture this. Mid-argument, he tosses in a sarcastic remark or an ironic joke to ease the mood. In his mind, he's lightening the load. In hers, he's dismissing her feelings. He wants to laugh through the fire. She wants to put it out completely before anyone cracks a smile. That mismatch, while subtle, hits deep. For the Taurus woman, conflict is serious business. It's a test of loyalty, emotional maturity, and shared values. She's not one to erupt easily, but once her limit is reached, the eruption is volcanic, and the aftermath ice cold. She remembers words long after they've been spoken. She replays tones, looks, pauses. And once her trust in your communication style erodes, rebuilding it is like trying to grow roses in concrete. So what's the solution? For the Gemini man, the first step is slowing down. Yes, his mind is fast. Yes, he processes externally. But in this relationship, rapid-fire conversation feels more like an assault than a connection. He must learn to pause, not just between words, but between emotions. Let things land. Let silence exist without rushing to fill it. Give her the time she needs to respond without assuming she's checked out or being dramatic. He also needs to stop treating every disagreement like a logic puzzle. Taurus isn't trying to win the argument. She's trying to feel safe again. That's a totally different goal. Sometimes, she doesn't need an explanation, just validation. She needs to hear, I understand why you're hurt, not, here's why you shouldn't be. For the Taurus woman, growth lies in trusting expression. Her default is to process everything inside first, but in doing so, she sometimes holds back too long. Her silence becomes a wall that Gemini can't interpret. If she can learn to articulate her discomfort earlier, before it hardens into quiet fury, she gives him a chance to adjust before real damage is done. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally impulsive. It means becoming emotionally accessible. She also has to let go of the idea that being steady means being silent. Speaking her truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is an act of strength, not vulnerability. And when she communicates proactively, she not only prevents conflict but actually deepens trust. The Gemini man wants to know what she's thinking, he just doesn't know how to read silence. Together, they need to reframe conflict as collaboration, not combat. Arguments aren't proof that something's broken, they're evidence that something matters. If they can learn to fight with respect, not reactivity, they'll discover that their differences don't have to divide them. In fact, they can actually complete each other. He teaches her that speaking doesn't mean surrendering control. She teaches him that listening is an act of love, not a loss of identity. Practical tools can help here. Setting cool down times after an argument so they don't talk in heat. Writing letters when verbal conversations feel too charged. Even therapy, not because they're in crisis, but because they value understanding. Communication is a muscle, and both of them will have to stretch in ways they're not used to. In their best moments, the Gemini man learns that not everything needs to be solved in one conversation. Sometimes presence is more powerful than performance. And the Taurus woman learns that opening up isn't weakness, it's the most direct route to intimacy. Conflict will never disappear in this match. But that's not the goal. The goal is resolution with respect, understanding without ego, the ability to say, we're on the same team, even when we don't speak the same language. When they reach that point, not perfectly, but intentionally, they transform conflict from a wedge into a window. A chance to see more of each other. A chance to grow. And isn't that what communication is all about? Not just being heard, but being known. Physical intimate connection. Now here's the part that might genuinely surprise you. Despite all their differences, the Gemini man and Taurus woman can generate a kind of slow-building, electrically charged physical connection that feels as rare as it is rewarding. It's not the kind of chemistry that explodes on impact. It's the kind that simmers, deepens, and becomes more nuanced over time. The reason it works? Because their contrasting needs in intimacy don't cancel each other out. They challenge each other to grow, to slow down, to surrender, and to open in entirely new ways. Let's start with the Gemini man's style of intimacy. He approaches the bedroom much like he approaches life, with curiosity, lightness, and a touch of mischief. He wants to explore, experiment, talk, laugh, try new things, and then reinvent it all again next week. His turn-ons often start in the mind, mental foreplay, playful teasing, innuendo slipped into casual conversation. For him, sex isn't just physical, it's intellectual. He's as turned on by a clever comeback as he is by a subtle glance. What keeps him engaged is not routine, but discovery. Now let's turn to the Taurus woman. Her energy is almost the opposite. She approaches intimacy with seriousness, warmth, and a strong sense of emotional grounding. For her, sex isn't about variety, it's about depth. She's slow to open up physically, but that's not because she's shy. It's because, for her, touch means trust. Affection means security. Physical closeness is sacred, not casual. She doesn't want to be sampled, she wants to be savored. Every caress, every glance, every sigh, it all means something. It all tells a story. So what happens when an ever-curious air sign meets a deeply sensual earth sign? At first, their differences might throw each other off. He might find her slow to warm energy puzzling. Why does she hesitate? Why does she need time to feel safe? And she might find his unpredictable, talkative bedroom presence overwhelming. Why all the distraction? Why can't he just be present? But that's where the magic starts. When the Gemini man learns to slow down, he begins to see the extraordinary richness in the Taurus woman's sensuality. She teaches him to feel more deeply, to experience pleasure with all five senses, not just as an idea, but as something tangible. She shows him that the act of intimacy can be grounding, spiritual, even transformative when done with care and intention. And when the Taurus woman begins to loosen her grip on the need for structure or emotional control in the bedroom, she discovers something surprising: joy, laughter, play, freedom. She realizes that sex doesn't always have to be this deeply weighted expression of love. It can also be light, fun, messy, weird, and still incredibly connected. He shows her that intimacy can be just as meaningful when it's spontaneous and playful as when it's slow and romantic. Their connection becomes a dance of balance, his air feeding the fire, her earth keeping it steady. Physically, their rhythms might take time to align. Gemini wants to explore, Taurus wants to immerse. He might initiate at unexpected times, in unexpected ways. She might want to create mood, build anticipation, and sink into an experience. But if they're patient with each other, this difference turns into a gift. He spices up her consistency. She gives depth to his spontaneity. Gemini's versatility in the bedroom keeps things from ever feeling stale. He's imaginative, adventurous, and eager to please, especially when he feels appreciated. He doesn't just want passion, he wants engagement. He wants reactions. And Taurus, with her rich, expressive sensuality, gives him exactly that once she trusts him. Her touch, her attention to detail, her ability to be fully present in each moment, those are intoxicating gifts to someone whose mind often races ahead. Emotionally, their intimacy becomes stronger as their trust deepens. And here's where the Taurus woman shines. Once she feels safe, her devotion is fierce. She's not just physically passionate, she's loyally passionate. She makes her partner feel chosen, cherished, wanted. That level of emotional grounding helps Gemini feel anchored in ways he didn't even know he craved. In return, Gemini helps her access parts of herself she didn't always explore. Her playful side, her fantasy side, her willingness to try something outside the norm. He encourages her to step outside her comfort zone, not to lose herself, but to discover new layers within herself. That kind of invitation, when offered respectfully, can lead to profoundly transformative physical experiences. Of course, this pairing isn't immune to misalignment. If Gemini gets distracted or careless, Taurus will feel emotionally disconnected and physically unfulfilled. If Taurus becomes too rigid or demanding, Gemini may start to retreat, fearing that their intimacy has become a chore rather than a shared joy. That's why communication outside the bedroom is so crucial, to keep desire alive inside it. They'll have to talk about what turns them on, what they need, what works and what doesn't. Gemini might need to learn that slowing down doesn't mean losing spontaneity, it means creating space for shared experience. Taurus might need to learn that trying something new isn't a betrayal of intimacy, it's an expansion of it. When they strike that balance, their intimate life becomes more than just chemistry. It becomes alchemy. Because what's more magical than two opposites learning to truly connect, not by changing who they are, but by growing into something more together? Their bedroom becomes a safe space for exploration and devotion, for comfort and excitement, for play and passion, a place where the Gemini man learns the language of presence, and the Taurus woman discovers the thrill of unpredictability. And that, in the world of love and connection, is something incredibly rare, and worth fighting for. Shared values, life goals. Here's where the relationship between a Gemini man and a Taurus woman is either going to solidify or split apart, because shared values and life goals are where fantasies meet reality. While chemistry and emotional connection can be powerful, the day-to-day grind of life, money, lifestyle, career choices, where to live, whether to have kids, can expose the deepest fractures between them. And the Gemini man and Taurus woman? They're often starting from two completely different maps. The Taurus woman values the tangible. Her life is built on structure and stability, and her goals often revolve around things like home ownership, long-term relationships, raising a family, building financial security, and living with a predictable rhythm. She wants to know what's happening tomorrow, and 5 years from now. She isn't interested in chaos or emotional volatility. For her, security is love. It's how she shows up for someone, and how she wants them to show up for her. To Taurus, values are grounded. You commit, you stay, you build, The things she wants are classic, but not boring, just deeply rooted in consistency. When she thinks about the future, she imagines Sunday dinners with family, a warm and steady home, traditions being passed down. She wants a partner who stands still long enough to build that with her. And then there's the Gemini man, the human wind chime of the zodiac. He values experience over stability. His life goals are often fluid, shifting as he learns and grows. He might want to live in a different country every year, learn 3 new languages, write a novel, launch a startup, and take an improv class all in the same decade. His sense of fulfillment doesn't come from stillness, it comes from movement. He's curious about everything, loyal to few things except his sense of freedom and his need for mental stimulation. To Gemini, values are fluid. You change, you adapt, you explore. His vision of the future might involve working remotely from a beach, avoiding strict routines, and maybe, settling down eventually, just not in the conventional way. He's not trying to avoid love, he's just trying to avoid stagnation. This is where the storm brews. To Taurus, Gemini's lifestyle can seem unreliable, even irresponsible. She might interpret his love of change as emotional avoidance. She's asking, "Where are we going?" And he's responding, "Isn't the ride the fun part?" Meanwhile, Gemini sees Taurus's vision of life as comforting, but suffocating. He might feel boxed in by her expectations, worried that committing means losing a part of himself. So what's the solution? Can they align their values without one sacrificing their identity? The answer lies in creating a shared vision, a life blueprint that holds room for both safety and spontaneity. This starts with redefining what security and freedom actually mean to each other. For Gemini, security doesn't have to mean a 9-to-5 job or buying a house in the suburbs. It could mean emotional trust, intellectual compatibility, and the freedom to grow within the relationship. For Taurus, freedom doesn't have to mean chaos or abandonment. It could mean learning to travel more, taking creative risks, or accepting that not everything in life can or should be planned. Maybe the Gemini man agrees to set down roots with a clear understanding that travel, exploration, or personal evolution will always be a part of who he is. Maybe the Taurus woman opens up to the idea that home doesn't have to be a place, it can be a person. It can be built from shared values, not just shared routines. They'll need to negotiate their dreams. This might mean building a stable home base that Taurus can count on, while Gemini has the freedom to explore new projects or take breaks from the routine. Maybe they alternate between phases of structure and flexibility, months of grounded living, followed by bursts of spontaneous adventure. If they communicate honestly, they can create a rhythm that satisfies both. Another essential point: financial goals. Taurus likely values long-term planning, savings, and a safety net. Gemini, while not necessarily irresponsible, may view money as a tool for experience rather than security. This could lead to conflict unless they align on how to manage finances. Perhaps Taurus leads the charge on savings and budgeting, while Gemini contributes ideas for how to balance fun and adventure without blowing the budget. It's not about control, it's about respect for each other's philosophies. Even their definitions of success may differ. For Taurus, success might look like a strong marriage, a beautiful home, and emotional constancy. For Gemini, it might look like living many lives in one lifetime, testing careers, chasing ideas, reinventing himself. The tension between these two definitions can create insecurity if not addressed openly. But with honest dialogue, they may come to understand that success doesn't have to look the same for both of them, it just has to be supported mutually. And when it comes to raising children, their values may again be tested. Taurus will want routine, consistency, moral structure. Gemini will want freedom of thought, creativity, and self-discovery. This contrast could cause friction in parenting styles, unless they lean into their strengths. Taurus provides the foundation, Gemini provides the flexibility. Together, they can raise children who feel both grounded and inspired. Ultimately, this pairing challenges the idea that shared values must be identical. Instead, it asks, can we build a life that honors both of our truths? It won't come easily. It will require constant dialogue, compromise, and a deep respect for how differently the other person views the world. But if they succeed, they create a love that's not just balanced, it's expansive. A love that doesn't force conformity, but instead encourages growth within shared commitment. Where one partner finds stillness without feeling stuck, and the other finds movement without feeling lost. That kind of partnership isn't just rare, it's remarkable. Because at the heart of it all, both the Gemini man and Taurus woman are searching for meaning. The difference is how they go about it. One chases it in ideas, the other builds it in moments. And when those two journeys intertwine with intention and care, they don't just find compromise, they find home. Final thoughts. So, are Gemini men and Taurus women destined to be cosmic soulmates, or are they simply two stars passing in the night, bound for different galaxies? The answer is as complex, layered, and beautifully paradoxical as the pairing itself. Because the truth is, they can be both. They can be the embodiment of romantic friction, but also the blueprint for what it means to choose love that requires effort, awareness, and deep transformation. This is not a love at first sight, happily ever after kind of match. It's a love that asks you to evolve story. The Gemini man is the ever-curious thinker, the idea chaser, the conversational acrobat who rarely lingers in one place, physically or emotionally, for too long. The Taurus woman is the embodiment of steadiness, a grounded soul who doesn't just seek love, she becomes it when she commits. He lives in motion, she lives in meaning, he runs toward stimulation, she moves toward security. In the short term, this creates intense magnetism, followed by real conflict. The Gemini man may struggle with her need for predictability. He may feel boxed in by routines, expectations, or the emotional depth that Taurus asks of him. Meanwhile, the Taurus woman may feel emotionally shortchanged by his intellectualizing, hurt by his inconsistency, or exhausted by his need for variety and movement. But here's the miracle that can happen when they choose to truly understand each other. They don't just survive their differences, they transcend them. Because when a Gemini man learns to pause, something shifts inside him. He begins to see value in the moment, in the stillness, in committing to something or someone not because it's always exciting, but because it's meaningful. He sees that love doesn't always have to thrill, it can also heal, soften, and stabilize. Through her, he finds roots. And when a Taurus woman learns to let go, her entire world expands. She learns that not all unpredictability is danger, that sometimes spontaneity brings growth, joy, and unexpected magic. She begins to welcome the unknown with a little less fear and a lot more grace. Through him, she finds wings. This is not a relationship that runs on autopilot. It demands presence. It demands communication, even when it's uncomfortable. It demands that both partners move beyond their natural instincts. Gemini must choose consistency. Taurus must choose flexibility. It's in these moments of intentional discomfort that something extraordinary happens. They grow into better versions of themselves. Their love, if nurtured, becomes a space of active transformation. A classroom, a sanctuary, a laboratory, a playground. It's not easy, but it's real. And let's not forget the depth of what they can create together. Their home can be one where ideas flow like rivers and comfort fills every room. Their partnership can be a mix of laughter and loyalty, surprise and safety, play and purpose. They can be the kind of couple who surprise everyone, not because they're loud or dramatic, but because they stay. Because they choose each other over and over again, even when it's hard. Because love, in the end, isn't about finding someone who mirrors you. It's about meeting someone who sees your cracks and still chooses to build with you. Who challenges your perspective, but also holds your hand when the world gets overwhelming. Gemini and Taurus may not match on paper, but they write a story that feels real. One that's textured, nuanced, and incredibly human. So no, this relationship isn't for the faint of heart. But it is for the brave, for the curious, for the steady-hearted and the restless-souled, for those who believe that love doesn't have to be easy to be worth it. Because when air and earth come together, when the breeze learns to rest, and the ground learns to shift, they don't just coexist. They create balance. And somewhere between stillness and speed, tension and tenderness, laughter and listening, they find something resembling harmony. Not perfect, but powerful. And in today's world, that kind of love, that's not just rare. That's revolutionary. Enjoyed this deep dive? Hit that like button, subscribe for more zodiac breakdowns, and check out the links in the description for more cosmic content. Want us to explore another zodiac combo next? Drop it in the comments.